The phone rang at exactly 11:47 p.m. Dre Moore stood frozen in the mahogany-paneled office on the 47th floor of Blunt Industries Tower, his cleaning cart still half visible in the doorway. He wasn't supposed to be here, not really. The executive suite was his father's route, but Marcus Moore had called in sick for the first time in 15 years, and Dre had volunteered to cover the shift. The phone rang again. Insistent. Angry almost. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled beneath him like a circuit board of light and shadow. Somewhere down there, his father was sleeping off a fever in their two-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. Somewhere down there, Dre's acceptance letter to Columbia Business School sat in a drawer, deferred for the third year in a row because somebody had to pay the bills. The phone rang a third time. Dre's hand hovered over the receiver. He knew the rules. Don't touch anything that isn't trash. Don't sit in the chairs. Don't even breathe too loudly when you're cleaning the C-suite. His father had drilled those rules into him since he was 12 years old, when Dre would sometimes tag along on weekend shifts. But the phone kept ringing, and Dre had always been cursed with one particular weakness. He couldn't stand leaving a question unanswered. He picked up. James Blunt's office. The words came out steadier than he felt. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, sharp as broken glass. Finally, do you have any idea what time it is in Singapore? We've been waiting for 3 hours. 3 hours, Mr. Blunt. The minister is 5 minutes from walking out of this hotel, and when he does, Qinghai Industries will be right there to take our place. Is that what you want? $50 billion walking out the door. Dre's mind raced. $50 billion. Singapore. A deal going south. There's been a he started, but she cut him off. Save it. We don't have time for excuses. The minister wants one thing before he signs. Assurance that Phase 2 will be carbon neutral by 2027. Your environmental report says 2029. He won't move without that guarantee. And frankly, after tonight's disaster, neither will we. The line crackled with expensive silence. Dre looked at the cleaning supplies in his cart. The mop. The industrial cleaner. The life he was supposed to be living. Then he looked at the computer on James Blunt's desk, its screensaver casting blue light across the room. He had two choices: hang up and let $50 billion disappear into the Singapore night, or do something monumentally stupid. Give me 5 minutes, Dre said. You have 3. The line clicked to hold. Welcome to Kindness Arena. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unseen connections that change lives, please help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter and deserve to be heard by hitting the subscribe button, liking the video, comment your thoughts, where you're watching from, and share it with someone who needs it to stay motivated. Your support keeps these powerful, true stories alive. Dre's fingers flew across the keyboard, his heart hammering against his ribs. James Blunt's computer wasn't locked, a security flaw that Dre registered somewhere in the back of his mind, even as he exploited it. He'd spent 4 years studying business at night, devouring every case study, every textbook he could get his hands on from the library. He'd memorized Forbes articles while riding the subway. He'd listened to earnings calls on his headphones while mopping floors. He knew Blunt Industries inside and out, not because he worked there, but because he'd dreamed of working there since he was 16. The environmental report loaded on screen. 247 pages of technical jargon and projections. Dre's eyes scanned faster than he'd ever read in his life. There, page 118. Phase 2 manufacturing facilities. The current timeline showed carbon-neutral conversion completing in Q3 2029, but the footnotes revealed something else entirely. The delay was purely financial, based on a conservative timeline that assumed traditional funding methods. Dre pulled up another window. Blunt Industries' Q4 financial statements. The company was sitting on $8.2 billion in liquid assets, earning minimal interest. Meanwhile, their sustainability division had submitted a proposal 6 months ago for accelerated carbon-neutral conversion using modular technology that could cut the timeline in half. Proposal status. Pending review. His 3 minutes were almost up. The phone line clicked back. Time's up, Mr. Blunt. We can guarantee carbon neutral by Q2 2027, Dre said, his voice finding a confidence he didn't know he possessed. We're accelerating Phase 2 by reallocating liquid assets in a modular conversion technology. The infrastructure exists. We've simply been too conservative with our capital deployment. Silence on the other end. Our sustainability team proposed this exact solution 6 months ago. Dre continued, pulling up the proposal on screen. We can have implementation teams on site within 90 days. The minister wants certainty? Tell him we're not just meeting his timeline, we're beating it by 18 months. That's quite a shift from the position your team took this afternoon. This afternoon, we were thinking like accountants, Dre said. Sometimes you need to think like leaders. He could hear muffled conversation in the background, Singapore voices conferring in rapid-fire English and Mandarin. Hold, please. 2 minutes stretched into 5. Then 10. Dre stood in the empty office, watching the second-hand sweep around the Patek Philippe clock on the wall. Each second felt like a countdown to disaster. What had he done? He'd just committed a multi-billion-dollar company to a strategy shift without any authority whatsoever. He'd impersonated a CEO. The line clicked back. Mr. Blunt, the minister would like to proceed, but he requires documentation of this commitment within 48 hours. Can you deliver? Dre's mouth went dry. Documentation. Legal commitments. This was spiraling far beyond a single phone call. You'll have it, he heard himself say. Excellent. Our teams will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. Singapore time to finalize terms. The minister is pleased you've finally seen the reason. A pause. For a moment there, I thought we'd lost you to Shanghai. Never, Dre said, and meant it. The call ended. He stood there in the silence of the 47th floor, the phone still in his hand, trying to process what he'd just done. Through the window, the city glittered indifferently. His reflection stared back at him. 23 years old, wearing his father's spare janitorial uniform, having just saved a $50 billion deal for a man he'd never met. The elevator chimed down the hall. Dre's blood turned to ice. Nobody should be coming up at midnight. He lunged for his cleaning cart, knocking over a bottle of floor polish in his haste. It clattered across the hardwood, impossibly loud. Footsteps approached. Dre grabbed the mop and tried to look purposeful, like someone who belonged here, who hadn't just impersonated a CEO and committed the company to a massive strategic pivot. The footsteps stopped at the doorway. Dre. He looked up to find Sarah Chun, James Blunt's executive assistant, standing there with her coat still on and an expression of complete bewilderment. What are you doing in Mr. Blunt's office? Where's your father? Sarah Chun had worked at Blunt Industries for 7 years, climbing from intern to executive assistant through a combination of brilliant competence and the kind of strategic thinking that could navigate corporate politics like a chess grandmaster. She was 31, ruthlessly efficient, and, as Dre was about to discover, someone who didn't miss a single detail. Her eyes swept the office, the illuminated computer screen, the phone slightly askew on the desk, the bottle of floor polish still rolling gently across the floor. I can explain, Dre started. The Singapore call. It wasn't a question. You answered it. There was no point lying. Yes. Sarah walked into the office and closed the door behind her. She set down her bag with deliberate care, then turned to face him with an expression he couldn't quite read. My father's sick, Dre said quickly. I was covering his shift. The phone kept ringing and I don't know what I thought. Maybe it was an emergency. It was. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling through what looked like a dozen urgent messages. The Singapore deal has been imploding for the past 6 hours. Mr. Blunt is in London negotiating the Heathrow expansion. He's unreachable until morning. Our entire Asia-Pacific team has been scrambling to keep Minister Zhao from walking. She looked up. What did you tell them? Dre swallowed hard. I told them we'd guarantee carbon neutrality by Q2 2027 using accelerated modular conversion technology and reallocated capital assets. Sarah's eyes widened fractionally. The Sustainability Division's proposal. You know about it? I type up all the proposals, she said, including the ones that never get read. She studied him with new interest. How did you know about Phase 2 timelines? About the liquid asset position? I read a lot. Business journals. The company's public filings. I've been following Blunt Industries for years. While mopping floors. While dreaming about not mopping floors, Dre corrected. Something flickered across Sarah's face, recognition, maybe, or empathy. She moved to the desk and woke up the computer, scanning the documents Dre had pulled up. This could actually work, she murmured. The numbers are solid. The minister gets his timeline, we get our deal, and the sustainability team finally gets their initiative funded. She turned back to Dre. Do you understand what you've done? Committed fraud? Impersonated an executive? Definitely getting fired. You solve a $50 billion problem that our entire senior leadership team couldn't crack in 3 months. Sarah sat down in one of the visitors' chairs, processing. The question is, what happens now? Now. Dre felt hysteria bubbling up. Now you call security, and I try to explain to my father why I got him fired after 15 years of perfect service. Or, Sarah said slowly, we figure out how to make this work. Dre stared at her. What? Mr. Blunt's flight lands at 6 a.m. He has a meeting scheduled at 8. That gives us. She checked her watch. 7 hours to create a briefing package that will convince him to honor the commitment you made. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Sarah stood up, her mind visibly shifting into high gear. The deal was dying. You saved it. Now we just need to make sure it stays saved. She pulled out her laptop. But I can't do this alone. I need someone who actually understands the sustainability proposal inside and out. Someone who can build a financial model that proves this works. I'm a janitor. Right now, at this moment, you're the person who knows this deal better than anyone else in this building. Sarah met his eyes. So, I'm going to ask you once. Can you do this? Dre looked down at his uniform, at the mop in his hand, at the life he was supposed to be living. Then he looked at Sarah Chun, who was holding out a chance he'd never dreamed of having. Yes, he said, I can do this. Then sit down. We have 7 hours to save your career before it even starts. By 1 a.m., they'd commandeered the conference room adjacent to Blunt's office. Sarah raided the executive kitchen for coffee, the good stuff, not the break room swill, while Dre pulled up every file he could find related to the Singapore deal. Start from the beginning, Sarah said, setting down 2 mugs. What exactly is Minister Zhao asking for? Dre organized his thoughts. The deal is for joint infrastructure development across 3 Southeast Asian nations. Blunt Industries would provide sustainable energy grids, water purification systems, and smart city technology. Total contract value, $50 billion over 10 years. Right. But Shanghai Industries has been undercutting us on price. Not just price, timeline. Shanghai promised carbon-neutral deployment by 2026. Our official timeline says 2029. Minister Zhao has political pressure to deliver green infrastructure. He can't wait 3 extra years. Sarah pulled up the contract negotiations on her screen. So why didn't we just promise an earlier timeline? Because our CFO, Richard Thornton, refuses to approve accelerated spending. He wants conservative projections, safe investments. Dre hesitated, but the sustainability team's proposal changes everything. They've identified modular conversion technology that cuts implementation time in half, but it requires upfront capital investment instead of the traditional phased approach. How much capital? Dre pulled up his calculations. $2.3 billion. Sarah whistled. That's a lot of floor polish. Despite everything, Dre laughed. We have $8.2 billion in liquid assets earning essentially nothing. The ROI on this investment is 32% over 5 years. It's not even a risk, it's a gift. So why hasn't Blunt approved it? Because Thornton blocks everything that threatens his quarterly earnings reports. And because Dre pulled up another document, nobody's ever connected the dots between this proposal and the Singapore deal. They've been treating them as separate issues. Sarah leaned back, seeing it. But they're not. They're the same issue. We can't win Singapore with our current timeline, and we can't justify accelerating our timeline without a deal big enough to warrant the investment. It's a chicken and egg problem that you just solved by promising both at once. That I solved by having no idea what I was doing and making it up as I went along, Dre corrected. Sarah smiled. That's called entrepreneurship. She pulled her laptop closer. Okay. We need 3 things. a financial model proving this works, a technical implementation timeline, and a presentation that makes Blunt want to claim this as his own idea. That last part seems ethically questionable. Dre, you impersonated CEO. We're way past ethical questions. We're in damage control territory. She softened. Look, you save the deal, but if we walk in there and say the janitors solve your billion-dollar problem, Blunt's ego will tank the whole thing. Men like James Blunt don't like being shown up, especially not by someone who's supposed to be invisible. It stung because it was true. So what do? We make it his idea. We present the solution in a way that lets him be the hero, and in the process, we make sure you're not invisible anymore. Sarah opened a new document. Now start building me that financial model. I'll work on the presentation. They worked in silence for the next 2 hours, broken only by the occasional question or the sound of keyboards clicking. Dre fell into the zone he'd only ever experienced while studying. That perfect flow state where problems became puzzles and solutions emerged like mathematical proofs. The financial model took shape. Projected revenues from the Singapore deal, implementation costs for the modular conversion, ROI timelines, risk assessments. He built in contingencies for delays, market fluctuations, regulatory changes. He stress-tested every assumption. At 3:30 a.m., Sarah came around to look at his screen. This is good. Really good. You sound surprised. I'm not surprised you're smart. I'm surprised you're this thorough. She pointed to one of his spreadsheets. This risk analysis. Where'd you learn to model like this? Textbooks. Online courses. YouTube. Dre shrugged. When you can't afford business school, you get creative. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You applied to Columbia. It wasn't a question. Dre looked at her. How did you? Your father keeps your acceptance letter in his locker. He showed it to everyone on the night crew. She sat down across from him. Why didn't you go? Someone has to pay rent. Someone has to make sure my little sister gets through high school without working nights. Dre closed the laptop. Dreams are expensive. So is wasted talent. Sarah's voice was firm. Dre, do you know how many MBAs I've met who couldn't build a model half as good? Who couldn't think strategically enough to connect these dots? She gestured at the screens. You're not supposed to be mopping floors. You know that, right? Knowing it and being able to do anything about it are different things. Not after tonight. Sarah pulled up the presentation she'd been building. Look at this. It was brilliant. She'd structured it perfectly. Opening with the crisis, deal dying, competitor winning, escalating with the stakes, $50 billion, market position, strategic reputation, then pivoting to the solution presented as a bold strategic insight rather than a desperate midnight scramble. This is impressive, Dre said. It's our ticket. Sarah looked at him seriously. When Blunt sees this, he's going to ask questions. Where did this analysis come from? Who built these models? I can cover for the basic work, but the technical details, he's going to want to talk to whoever put this together. You're saying I need to be in that meeting. I'm saying you need to be ready for what happens when you are. Dre felt the weight of it settling over him. And what happens? Best case, Blunt recognizes your value and finds a place for you in the company. Worst case, he's furious that his assistant and a janitor went behind his back, and we both get fired. You could lose your job because of me. I could lose my job playing it safe and watching this company make stupid decisions. Sarah's jaw set. I didn't climb to this position by being timid, and I'm not about to watch them squander a $50 billion deal because nobody had the guts to think differently. She pulled up another screen, an email draft. I'm going to send this to Blunt's phone at 5:30 a.m., time for when he lands. It'll say, I pulled an all-night emergency session to save the Singapore deal, and I have a critical briefing ready for him. He'll be curious enough to take the meeting. And then we find out what kind of man James Blunt really is. James Blunt arrived at 7:47 a.m., looking like a man who'd spent 12 hours on a plane and didn't appreciate being ambushed before coffee. He was 53, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made boardrooms go quiet. He'd built Blunt Industries from a small construction firm into a global infrastructure giant through a combination of aggressive deal-making and perfect timing. People either called him a visionary or a tyrant, depending on whether they worked for him. Sarah intercepted him at the elevator. This better be worth dragging me in an hour early, Sarah. Singapore's back on track, but you need to see the briefing before the 9 a.m. call. That got his attention. Blunt changed direction toward the conference room, stopping short when he saw Dre sitting at the table in a borrowed button-down shirt that Sarah had retrieved from the company's emergency closet. "Who's this?" "Dre Moore. He's the one who saved the deal." Blunt's expression flickered between confusion and irritation. "You're Marcus Moore's son, the night janitor." "Yes, sir." Dre stood, willing his voice steady. "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" Sarah launched into the explanation with the efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation in her head a dozen times. The missed call, Dre's answer, the commitment to Minister Zhao, the solution that had been sitting in their own sustainability division for 6 months. Blunt listened without interrupting, which Dre suspected was a bad sign. When Sarah finished, he turned to Dre with an expression that could freeze lava. "You impersonated me." "I answered a phone that wouldn't stop ringing," Dre said. "I didn't identify myself as you. When they assumed I was speaking for you, I made a choice. Let $50 billion walk away, or try to help. By committing my company to a strategy one never approved. By committing your company to a strategy your own team proposed 6 months ago that should have been approved the day it landed on your desk." The room went silent. Sarah looked like she wanted to dive under the table. Blunt's eyes narrowed. "Do you have an opinion on how I run my company?" "I have an opinion on leaving money on the table." Dre pulled up the presentation on the screen. "Your CFO blocked this proposal because he's optimizing for quarterly earnings. But you didn't build this company by thinking quarterly. You built it by thinking decades ahead. You don't know anything about how I built this company. I know you started with $12 million in debt and a contract to build a single parking garage in Newark. I know you bet everything on sustainable materials when everyone said it was too expensive. I know you've built your reputation on being bold when everyone else was being careful." Dre met his eyes. "So why are you letting Richard Thornton make you careful now?" Blunt stared at him. "You've got the nerve, I'll give you that." "I've got nothing to lose," Dre corrected. "You can fire me for answering a phone. You can fire Sarah for trying to help me clean up the mess, but first, look at the numbers." He walked Blunt through the presentation. Every slide, every projection, every assumption. The modular conversion technology, the accelerated timeline, the ROI that made the conservative approach look foolish. The competitive advantage they'd gain over Shanghai, not just in Singapore, but in every emerging market. Blunt asked questions, hard ones, technical details about implementation, risk factors, regulatory challenges. Dre answered them all, pulling from the research he'd done through the night, from years of studying this industry, from a deep well of knowledge he'd never had the chance to use until now. 30 minutes later, Blunt sat back in his chair. "You built this analysis in one night." "Yes, sir." "And you've never worked in corporate strategy? Never had an official role at this company beyond janitorial services?" "Correct." Blunt was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sarah, get Richard Thornton and the sustainability team in here. We have 90 minutes before the Singapore call." He stood. "And someone get this young man a proper shirt. He's not going into that meeting looking like he raided the L. Lost and found." Dre's heart hammered. "Sir, you saved a $50 billion deal and made me look smarter than I've been acting. Don't make me regret thanking you for it." Blunt headed for the door, then paused. "Sarah, after Singapore, I want Moore's personnel file on my desk and schedule a meeting with HR." When he left, Dre collapsed into a chair. "Did I just get fired or hired?" "With Blunt, it's hard to tell the difference," Sarah said, but she was smiling. "But I think you just did the impossible." "What's that?" "You made him listen." The 9 a.m. Singapore call was a masterclass in corporate theater. Richard Thornton, the CFO, had arrived looking like someone who'd been woken at dawn and forced to defend a strategy he'd spent months blocking. The sustainability team, led by a brilliant engineer named Dr. Patricia Reeves, sat across from him with barely concealed vindication. Blunt opened the call with Minister Zhao and his delegation with the kind of confidence that came from having a solution instead of excuses. "Minister Zhao, my team has been working through the night to address your concerns. We're prepared to commit to carbon-neutral deployment by Q2 2027, 18 months ahead of your requirement." On screen, Minister Zhao's expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued. That's quite a change from yesterday's position, Mr. Blunt. Yesterday, we were thinking too small. Today, we're thinking like partners who want this to succeed for the next 50 years, not just the next 5. Blunt nodded to Dr. Reeves. My chief sustainability officer can walk you through the technical specifications. Dr. Reeves took over, explaining the modular conversion technology with the kind of enthusiasm that came from finally being heard. Dre watched from the back of the room, still wearing his borrowed shirt, still not quite believing he was here. Minister Zhao asked questions. His team asked questions. Thornton looked increasingly uncomfortable as the numbers proved that the conservative approach he'd championed was actually the riskier play. Then Zhao asked the question Dre had been dreading. Mr. Blunt, what changed between yesterday and today? Your team seemed quite committed to the 2029 timeline. Blunt didn't hesitate. What changed is that someone finally connected the dots between what we were capable of doing and what we were actually planning to do. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see the obvious solution. And whose fresh eyes would those be? Blunt's gaze flicked to Dre, just for a second. My strategy team. Dr. Reeves has been advocating for this approach for months. I'm grateful we finally listened. It was a lie, but a generous one. Blunt was giving credit to the person who deserved institutional recognition while keeping Dre's role quiet. Whether that was to protect Dre or himself, Dre couldn't tell. The call ran another 40 minutes. By the end, Minister Zhao was smiling, a rare sight, according to Sarah's whispered commentary, and his team was drafting implementation schedules. Mr. Blunt, I must admit, I'm impressed. You've turned this negotiation around completely. We'll have our legal team send over the revised terms by the end of the day. We'll be ready to sign by Monday, Blunt said. When the screen went dark, the room erupted. Dr. Reeves was beaming. Thornton looked like he was calculating his own job security. Sarah caught Dre's eye and gave a subtle thumbs up. Blunt stood. Thornton, work with Reeves on the capital allocation. I want implementation teams mobilized by next week. This is our priority. He turned to the room. The rest of you, excellent work. Let's make damn sure we deliver what we promised. People filed out, congratulating each other, already moving on to the next crisis, the next deal, the velocity of corporate momentum carrying them forward. Dre stayed in his seat, watching them go. This was the world he'd dreamed of joining, the strategy sessions, the high-stakes decisions, the feeling of building something that mattered. More. Blunt was standing in the doorway. My office. 5 minutes. James Blunt's office was exactly what Dre expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than a car, awards and photos documenting decades of deals and developments. Blunt sat behind his desk and gestured for Dre to take a seat. Your personnel file makes for interesting reading, Blunt said. High school valedictorian. Columbia acceptance. Deferred 3 years running. You've been working nights here for 4 years while taking online business courses. He looked up. Why Columbia, specifically? Best financial engineering program in the country, Dre said. I want to work in infrastructure finance, emerging markets, sustainable development. I want to build things that matter. Like what we just did with Singapore. Exactly like that. Blunt leaned back in his chair. You know what most people don't understand about business more? It's not about the money. Money's just how we keep score. It's about solving impossible problems. Finding the angle nobody else sees. Having the guts to bet on your own judgment when everyone else says you're wrong. Is that what you did with me? Bet on your judgment. I bet on the results. You delivered results. Blunt pulled out a folder. I spoke with HR this morning. Here's the situation. I can't hire you into a senior strategy role with no credentials and 4 years of janitorial work on your resume. I'd lose every qualified candidate who worked their way up properly. Dre's stomach sank. I understand. I'm not finished. I can't hire you into senior strategy, but I can hire you as a strategic analyst, entry level, reporting to Sarah. The pay is $60,000 a year, full benefits, and you'd be working on projects like Singapore. Real work, not fetching coffee. $60,000. That was more than his father made after 15 years. That was Columbia tuition. That was everything changing. There's a catch, Blunt continued. The job requires a bachelor's degree minimum. You don't have one. No, sir. So here's what's going to happen. Blunt Industries has an executive education partnership with Columbia. We sponsor employees for degree programs tied to their career development. You're going to enroll in Columbia's business program this spring. Full tuition, full salary while you study. In exchange, you commit to working for me for 4 years after graduation. Dre couldn't breathe. Sir, don't thank me yet. You'll be working full-time while going to school full-time. It's going to be brutal. Sarah will work you harder than any professor, and if you screw up, if you can't handle the pressure, the offer disappears. Blunt's expression was steel. But if you can do this, if you can prove that last night wasn't a fluke, you'll have a career here. A real one. Why? Dre asked. Why are you doing this? Blunt was quiet for a moment. 30 years ago, I was a kid from nowhere with nothing but ambition and a willingness to work harder than everyone else. Someone gave me a shot I didn't deserve on paper. I built this company because of that shot. He met Dre's eyes. Talent isn't rare, Moore. Talent is everywhere, in every neighborhood, every background. What's rare is getting the chance to use it. So I'm giving you that chance. I won't waste it. See that you don't. Blunt slid the folder across the desk. Sign the offer letter. Start Monday. And more? Your father's getting a raise and a promotion today, shift supervisor. He's been here 15 years. It's overdue. Dre signed with shaking hands. When he stood to leave, Blunt called after him. One more thing. That sustainability proposal you implemented? Dr. Reeves has 6 more sitting in her drawer that Thornton blocked. I want you to review all of them. If they're as good as the first one, we're going to stop leaving money on the table. Yes, sir. Dre walked out of that office in a daze. Sarah was waiting by her desk, trying very hard to look like she hadn't been eavesdropping. So, she asked, I'm going to Columbia. Sarah broke into a grin. And working for me, which means I'm going to make your life hell. I wouldn't expect anything less. She handed him a coffee, the good kind, from the executive kitchen. Welcome to corporate strategy, Moore. Try not to impersonate any more CEOs. I'll do my best. The Singapore project broke ground in March with full international press coverage. Minister Zhao gave a speech about sustainable development and international partnership. James Blunt stood beside him, projecting confidence and vision. Somewhere in the back of the crowd, Dre Moore watched with his Columbia classmates, having just finished his first semester with a 3.9 GPA. He was exhausted from juggling work and school, surviving on coffee and ambition, but he'd never been happier. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Stop watching groundbreakings and review the Brazil proposal. Blunt wants your analysis by Monday. Dre smiled and pocketed his phone. He had work to do. On his way out, he passed the executive tower where his father now worked days supervising the maintenance team with better hours and better pay. Marcus Moore had cried when Dre told him about the promotion, about Columbia, about everything that had happened that impossible night. You answered the phone, his father had said, shaking his head in wonder. You just answered the phone. But it wasn't about answering a phone. It was about seeing an opportunity and having the courage to grab it. It was about knowing your worth, even when the world told you to be invisible. It was about refusing to let circumstances define your ceiling. Dre had spent 4 years mopping floors and dreaming of being in the room where decisions happened. Now he wasn't just in a room, he was making the decisions. The janitor's son had become the strategist. And somewhere in the halls of Blunt Industries, a phone was ringing. This time, someone would be there to answer it. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted and that even broken path can lead to beautiful places and change of lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Arena because your support keeps stories like this alive and spreading. Tell us in the comment what you would have done differently if you were the janitor's son. Would you have offered him the job? Or has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life in ways you didn't expect? We'd love to hear your story.